You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan, and with us, as always, is our producer, Chelsea Steer. Chelsea, what are we sharing with folks today?
Hey, Sarah. Okay, listeners, we have got a brand new book club selection that we're going to be announcing. And Sarah, we're actually going to hear a conversation that you had with Bean to Bar chocolate co-founder, Matt Cross of Harvest Chocolate. But first, Sarah, I have to talk about our big goal. You know, as well as everyone watching, if you've been watching us for a while here on the channel, that our goal is to reach 1 million food founders. And there are a couple of ways that you watching on YouTube can help us. Number one is to share this episode with anybody that you think might find it helpful. Give us a like, leave us a comment. All of that is going to help us get in front of more people. But the biggest way you can help is to subscribe to this channel, which you can do right below, and make sure that you turn on notifications so that you find out when we post more episodes like this. Okay, Sarah. So today, as I mentioned before, you're sharing the work that you did with Matt Cross.
Yeah, so Matt, as you mentioned, is the co-founder along with his wife, Elizabeth, of Harvest Chocolate. They spent years working in fine dining. They worked in San Francisco, Napa Valley, Chicago, New York City. As he was listing the names of the cities and the restaurants that they worked in, it was amazing. They worked in top Michelin star restaurants, across the country. Elizabeth on the pastry side and Matt on the more savory side of the kitchen. But when they felt like something was missing, they moved back home to Michigan, which is where they are now, and where Harvest Chocolate was born. They studied chocolate inside and out. They, really wanted to understand the craft, traveling to different cocoa origins and developing their passion for bean to bar chocolate and thoughtfully sourced cacao. They started in a home kitchen, like so many good food businesses do, and slowly grew from there. And now they've got a beautiful retail shop in their hometown. And we talk about, what those early years were like. And also, during CFO office hours, which is where we worked together, we really looked at sort of where do we go from here? And as we've been talking about quite a bit here on the podcast lately, Chelsea, it started with a profit assessment. Matt did it on his own via our course and brought his results to office hours. And from what I understand, he had done it once before and then did an updated version and brought that here. And what we realized, together in looking at the data was his company was in a really strong position. They had good margins. Their operating expenses were under control. Along with some other things, they were in a position to grow their revenue, which is not always the case for every business. And we won't dive into that today, but it was the case for him. And so then we got to spend time on projections, which I know can be a very scary thing for a lot of founders. And so I wanted to invite Matt here to talk about his experience as a whole, but also what it was like to make sales projections, how we went about it together, and then the next steps that he took from there.
Yeah, and I loved listening to that part specifically where you talked about like how you developed those projections, those sales projections, because it felt like so simple to me.
Yeah.
Like you just took this basic data and then translated it into future sales, and it seemed so easy.
Yeah. And I think we talk about it on the episode. Like there's a little bit of trial and error in it too, right? Like you might use the method that we're using and go, oh, that seems like too much. Like you will have a gut instinct, you know what I mean, after you make your initial projections and you can adjust from there. So, as we did with Matt. And so I think it's a really interesting thing that I wanted to talk about, especially again, knowing that so many founders get overwhelmed with projections. We also talk about some reports that Matt has set up for him and his wife in the business and the surprising effects that it has had for them. And then one of the things that you and I talk about loving so much about office hours, and we hear this from members all of the time, is the ability to hear from others in the group. So it's a small group, no more than 4 people at a time. And in this case, Matt was actually able to provide some really insightful, I'll call it marketing advice to another founder. And because, without spoiling too much, because it's a common sort of question that I hear, I thought, that's another thing that Matt can add to the conversation and share with a wider audience as well. So there's so much I love to share about office hours here and there on this podcast, but sometimes it's just like, okay, I want to have the founder on. I feel like it'll be most impactful and helpful, to have them here. So I was delighted that Matt said yes and joined us for a conversation.
Yeah, I thought it was a really, really good conversation. And if you listen to this episode and you feel like, oh, CFO office hours might be the right place for me, please do check out our website. You can go to thegoodfoodcfo.com and just click on coaching
Yep.
and make sure that you get on our wait list. We are pausing office hours for the summer at the moment, but get on our wait list, and then that way we will notify you as soon as we're ready to come back.
Yeah, exciting.
Okay, Sarah. So before we get to that conversation with Matt, I did make a promise at the top of this episode,
Mhm.
and that was that we are getting a book club announcement.
Yes. I'm excited about this book club selection. I think we've shared before like why the book club exists and what we hope to accomplish through the book club. In addition to connection, it's continued education, right? So sometimes there are books on finance specifically, sometimes there are books on the industry, sometimes there are books on, self-development and understanding ourselves better and how we operate within our businesses and within our industry. This book club selection is a little bit different, but ultimately I think like meets that same goal. It's called The Mom Test. And it's by Rob Fitzpatrick. It's a fun pink book. It is a very brief read, which is why we are selecting it for the summer months. We know kids are going to be getting out of school. We know that summer is just busy in general. And so this is a skinny book, a light read, but a very impactful read. It is essentially a book about how to talk to customers and learn if your business is a good idea.
Mm.
And this sounded very basic to me, but when I tell you that it changed my mind about how to talk to customers, potential customers, it really truly did. So I don't want to give too much away, but I think that one thing I will say is that if you ask your mom, if you ask your partner, if you ask your friend, if they think that your product is good, if they think it's a good idea that you launch their business, I think more times than not, you're going to get a positive response, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because people don't want to hurt your feelings and people want to be supportive. But that's not going to translate necessarily into a business that is financially successful. It doesn't mean that you have a viable product. So you have to dig a bit deeper. And to do that, you have to ask the right questions of the right people. So this book really walks us through the process of how to ask questions, how to not lead people in a certain direction unknowingly that's going to give us a response that makes us feel really good about what we're doing, but end up not being beneficial to us in the long run. I think that what is going to be really fun is that when we get together for our book club event, that we can actually practice this with one another.
Mm.
I know that as I was reading the book, I have lots of earmarked pages. I've got several underlines, and I was starting to formulate, how can I talk to founders to really get to the heart of what their biggest financial struggles are, what their biggest roadblocks are, because I create tools based on the needs of the clients that I have, right? And so when I create a tool for them, I then translate it to the Good Food CFO and make it available for everybody. But my list of clients is really small compared to the number of founders that are out there, right? And is such a tiny selection of people with so far a pretty specific subset of issues that they need support with. So finding out that there's a way to talk to founders that can help me better understand how to help them felt really great. And I want other founders to have that feeling. I
Yeah.
also want people to have knowledge, the knowledge that's in this book about how to identify if you're really meeting the need of someone, right?
Yeah. And I would even say, like, to feel confident
Exactly.
that you're meeting the need.
Yeah, and that translates directly into financial success in that if you have a product that is solving a true problem, if you have a product that is available where your customers are going to shop, if you have a product that has messaging that speaks to your customer based on, the information they've provided with you, lots of financial things start flowing in the right direction, right? Everything from your product actually selling to your marketing dollars creating a return on investment. I mean, the list goes on and on. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but I think I was surprised by this book. I shared that I was reading it on Instagram, and so many people in the stories were like, I've never heard of this book. And I
Mm.
was like, all right, then that there's interest in this. People have not heard of it. I'm really digging it. So it is officially our book club selection. And so just once again, it's called The Mom Test, and it's by Rob Fitzpatrick.
That's awesome. I can't wait to read it. If you listening also cannot wait to read it, check it out in our bookshop. We're going to have the link to that in the show notes. And you can also always go to our website, thegoodfoodcfo.com, and click on book club and find the link there as well. And then, Sarah, we're going to be getting together in July,
Mm.
Wednesday, the 16th, to talk to founders and
Yeah.
have exactly that conversation that you talked about, right? We'll talk about what we took away from the book. Maybe we'll get a little practice time in. I think that's a really great idea. And that is going to be happening at 9 a.m. Pacific. That's 12 p.m. or noon if you're on the East Coast like me. And again, you can go to thegoodfoodcfo.com and click on book club to RSVP for that event as well.
Yeah, Chelsea, and I just want to remind everybody that shopping from our bookshop directly supports both this podcast as well as independent bookstores around the country.
Yeah, exactly, Sarah. Okay, so what do you say we get to your conversation with Matt?
Yeah, let's do it. Hey there, it's Sarah. If you're enjoying the podcast, I want to invite you to become a Baba Yacht member. It stands for Building a Business on Your Own Terms, and your membership directly supports the continued production of this podcast and helps us reach our goal of supporting 1 million food founders. As a member, you'll get access to our live coaching events, have your brand featured right here on the podcast, be the first to test our new tools, and receive a 10% discount on all of our tools and services when you choose an annual plan. Join fellow successful founders at thegoodfoodcfo.com/Baba Yacht. That's spelled BABOYOT. Together, we're changing the way that food business is done. Now, back to the show. Hey, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you decided to join me. You agreed to. As we'll talk about in a little bit, you were in office hours recently. You taught me and really shared some valuable information with another office hours member, which I thought was just amazing. And the work that you did in office hours, I thought was really interesting and valuable. So thought it'd be an amazing opportunity to have you here to talk a little bit about all of that and share it with our wider audience. So thank you for, kind of donating your time, if you will, to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like one of the things I wanted in office hours was to kind of hear from other food business founders, and we got that of just three people who are doing different things, but all very similar in different in kind of in a lot of ways too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why don't we kick things off by talking a little bit about Harvest Chocolate? Give us the backstory, if you will, and what you guys are up to now.
Yeah, so Harvest Chocolate, we're a bean to bar chocolate maker in Tecumseh, Michigan, which means that we source whole cocoa beans and roast them and grind them into chocolate. It kind of reminds me of the early days of like craft beer or like
Mm,
craft coffee, in the way it just kind of the nature of like the market and the businesses in here and the people. A lot of them have come from those kind of places. But my wife and I, we started this about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. We both worked in restaurants, both have culinary degrees. We spent probably about a decade in like Michelin star restaurants, just kind of bouncing around like most of those kind of cooks do. So we worked in like New York and San Francisco and Chicago. Eventually settled down here in Michigan. It was supposed to be temporary, and that was about 10 years ago. So my wife's been really the one who kind of brought us into the chocolate side, I kind of gave up food for a while. I said, no more, I've had enough. Um, but she kept working in it and kept working in chocolate. And so she has definitely the one who brought the knowledge and expertise in how to do this. And I was like, wait, this is way cooler than what I'm doing. And it makes people happy and everyone loves chocolate. So like, let's do this.
Yeah. What did the business look like when you launched 4 years ago?
It was out of our kitchen at our house. It was during the pandemic. We had kind of been talking about a business for a long time. And Elizabeth, my wife, was working for another business, ended up being the only employee. And we were just like, why don't we just do this for ourselves? Which kind of famous last words. So we started just making chocolate at home. Like she already knew how to make chocolate, so it wasn't like learning from scratch, but making chocolate at home and under the cottage food law in Michigan and selling to people at farmers markets and texting our friends and family and getting them to buy it. That's it. That's the earliest was that. I had packaging on the kitchen table.
Yeah, I know that life. Yeah. So I think if people are watching on YouTube, you can see there's a person, maybe that's your wife in the background.
It is. That's
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
stocking
She's stocking the
shelves
shelves.
in your store. So when did the store come to be, and how has that been for you guys?
The store's been great. Originally, we didn't want any sort of retail. We just wanted like a workshop in the woods where it was
Mhm.
beautiful and like everything was perfect and we would just hang out there. Turns out that the best marketing that you have as a chocolate maker is making chocolate. It smells great and people love to see it and it helps people understand like why we're different than more commercial chocolate that's available. So it kind of came about 3 years ago. We moved into this space out of a commercial kitchen we were in for like a year after we moved out of the house. And there's another business wanted to bring us in. They wanted a chocolate maker in this space.
Mhm.
It's been chocolate or ice cream retail in this location for like 50 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of fun in that like people just kind of walk in and don't realize that anything's different. So we were sharing the space. They left about a year ago, and we
Okay.
took over. We opened last May with this retail space ourselves, and it's been great. It's
Yeah.
been I didn't really expect it, but it's kind of fun.
Good. I love that. So you just reminded me of something when I'm going to talk a little bit about office hours now, and some interesting things that we talked about that I think will be also interesting for our listeners to hear. So do you remember your goal or objective at the start?
Did you write it down?
I
Because I
didn't.
was thinking about, oh, okay. No, it was something like just simple. It was just kind of like, I want to plan to like go forward. Like it was, I bought the class, it was like in December and I bought it for February because I was just waiting. I wanted the holidays to go by and then one more month just for good measure.
Hmm.
And then we did February and it was really just kind of like, I just wanted to kind of take a look at what we have, what's going on. I haven't done anything other than just keep up with the books and just have an idea of like what to work on for the year.
Yeah. What I do remember is that one of the first things we looked at was your profit assessment. And we talk about that quite a bit on the podcast, I think, these days. But just to remind folks, it's our way of taking the profit and loss statement and sort of boiling it down into what I think is the most important and helpful information for you to see what's going on in your business. And generally, when I'm looking at it, I'm looking for what are the revenue patterns? You know what I mean? Are things kind of all over the place month to month? Do we see seasonality? Do we see, consistent growth in revenue? So what do we have going on, on the top line, if you will? Then we go down to gross profit. That's an extremely important metric that we look at. So is it above or below 50%? And what can we learn from that? Then we look at cost of goods sold. Where are those sitting, right? Do we need to change anything in regard to our margin? And if so, which part of COGS can we tackle? And then we look at operating expenses. Okay, how much of our operating expenses are being covered by our gross profit? Do we have a shortfall, or are we bringing in enough, cash? And sometimes there's problems all along, and sometimes there's, just sort of problems in one area or another. Yours didn't really have any problems. And when that happens, we say, okay, your margins are good, your operating expenses are, consistent, and, they don't seem, out of control or inflated. The advice there is, Matt, it looks like you can focus on growth. It looks like you can focus on selling your product because everything within the business appears to be working well. And so from there, I recall really focusing on sales and asking the question, like, where do you want to drive growth? And the thing I do have in my notes is that you were like, I'm not 100% sure. Like, obviously we want to grow revenue in the store. It's still fairly new, but like, what else should we be doing, or sort of where do we go from there? Does that
Yeah.
track? Does that seem right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was super great to hear, just like, hey, like another person telling you that, like, hey, you're doing good. Because, you put the kind of guardrails in place in terms of like pricing and costs and
Mhm.
stuff, and then you just gotta run it and see if it works.
Yeah.
And so it's always comforting to hear that, hey, the wheels aren't falling off. I had done a profit assessment too myself, like a year, I think the year before,
Hmm.
and it caught a bunch of mistakes that I had in my bookkeeping.
Mm.
So that was good in that
Yeah.
then I spent a while going back and fixing all of that. But at least now I have clean books going back all this time.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's I've been learning things that people like use the profit assessment tool for, which is really fascinating. So we do a profit assessment on like the Sarah Delavan consulting side, and step one is me combing through people's QuickBooks so that when we put it into the profit assessment, I have confidence that like everything is where it's supposed to be, and all of that. So it's nice to hear that you doing the DIY version, taking your report for like from QuickBooks and putting it in, which is like literally a copy paste, but
Yeah.
can help you actually see those issues as well. That's great. And I'd never heard that
Mhm.
before. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and I forget what it was, but it was something just clearly looked really wrong. And it went back to, I switched from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online,
Right.
and those were the ones that were messed up. So yeah, now
Yeah.
it's fixed.
Yeah, that's great. The other thing that someone has told me that they do with the profit assessment is they use it as a projection tool, which I just learned that last week, and that
Yeah.
really excited me. So I'm kind of dive into maybe making a video or something to help people, you know, create a really simple version of a forecast. And that's sort of what you and I did as a next step. We didn't use the
Mhm.
profit assessment. But because we knew we were going to focus on growth, and there was that question of where do we grow, and maybe how much, you know, we what I recommended was like, let's just do a forecast of revenue. Let's not try to tackle, because you had said to me, I have the forecasting course and I can work through that. And my recommendation to you was like, that's great if you want to do that. But for the sake of office hours and getting something, out of it here, let's just focus on the sales projection. So this seemed very simple to me, but I remember you being like, oh, this is helpful. So I wanted to talk about kind of what we did
Mhm.
there. You had a report from Shopify, I believe, that had your sales by channel in it,
Mhm.
in revenue dollars, if I remember correctly. And it was for like the last 12 months or maybe
Yeah.
2024 as a whole. And what we were able to do there is simply calculate the percentage of total revenue that each channel brought in. So essentially, if, let's just say retail sales were 10,000 of a total of $100,000 in sales, that's 10%, right? Then you continue to do that math for each of your channels. And then, so that like can provide a light bulb moment for some people to go, oh, I didn't like, I can see the numbers, but those ratios just kind of help me think about it in a different way. And then from there, the next step was, how much do you hope to make this
Mhm.
coming year? And you said, I believe you said, I want to double our revenue. So it's like, okay, and I'm making up these numbers, but if we started at 100,000 and you want to double, that's 200,000. And then it's like, where do you want that growth to be? And most people say, I don't know. You want it to be like some to be in the store, but the next question that people have is like, but what's realistic? What should I forecast? And a great place to start is just to use the percentage, the sales channel percentages that we just calculated in the future projection. And I remember you saying, "Oh, I like this. This makes sense." Can you talk a little bit about that and like maybe what it was like from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, we've built this from the beginning to have multiple, to sell through multiple channels, intentionally to just be more flexible. I mean, take the example of like COVID, the people that didn't have online stores or anything built out had to
Yeah.
start from zero. Whereas like, we've got a lot of, we can move across online, selling wholesale through to retailers, and then in our own store. So kind of depending on what needs to be done, we can move across those channels. And it's great for a rainy day in town and nobody's coming out. We can do just as much business just through wholesale and online as we may have done in the store that day, which is always kind of surprising. Sometimes you don't always know exactly how things are moving across them. So being able to see by channel is super helpful in that, like, I mean, I have like, you have an idea, but then when seeing the numbers of, okay, the online is this percent and in store is this percent, I think we're like 50% in store and then 25% online and 25% through retailers.
Mhm.
And then the next question is that I like that we went through is that how much, what are your cost of goods and what are your expenses to sell through those channels? And obviously retailers was the lowest, and then online and in store are kind of roughly the same. And so it just makes sense to go after where we have the most control, where we get the most amount of money from it. Retailers are fickle and tricky, and even if your product's selling the top selling product in their store that year, you might not be getting reorders, which is something that happened to me, and I don't understand it, but it's just frustrating, right? So like just being able to control what we can do is I think where we feel comfortable, and then the numbers back it up. And that's
Yeah.
super great. And then the other thing too, of just like the forecasting is it's always just you never get it right and never can. In between my food jobs, I worked in sales and marketing and did a lot of sales forecasting. And it's even the big companies are just throwing darts at a wall, really. Just saying that for everyone because I know how
Yeah.
how difficult, yeah, I don't know how to do this, but I like to, we were talking about like that's your goal, like say before the end of the year, but you don't have to wait till the end of the year to start like, oh, I didn't make it. Like you can
Yeah.
adjust along the way. And if you have the right, if you have the reporting in place and you're monitoring it, you can start making adjustments quicker instead of just waiting and hoping that it all works out in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you bring that up because I think I said this was a while ago when I had Felice Thorpe on. We were talking about forecasting. It was like, if you get your forecast 100% correct, quit your job, go to Vegas. Like you have the best luck in the world. You don't need to be running a food business. So it's not about getting it right. It's really about thinking through the process, thinking about, okay, we are in a position in your case that we can grow our revenue and it will lead to positive financial outcomes. And so what are the channels we want to do it in and how much growth do we need to have to hit our target? So using this sort of made up $200,000, someone might look at the numbers and go, "Oh, if we were maintaining 25% of sales like in wholesale at that 200,000 mark, that's a lot of wholesale. And I don't know that we want to put the manpower or like be focused on reaching out to new, like we would need new stores. Maybe we don't want to, maybe
Yeah.
we don't want to go down that path. Right. And so you could see that and go, you know what? I'm going to adjust my percentages for how I want this to go this year and make those my targets and my goals. Alternatively, you might say, like, this has happened with a client of mine, like our store sort of maxed out at the amount of revenue that it brought in last year. Like we can't possibly ring up more people. So then what that did for her is go, but I do want to keep 50% of my revenue from my store. So what are the actions I can take to make that happen? I can increase my average order value. Okay, how do I do that? What are the things that I can bring into my store or, offer to customers that can actually help make that happen, because I can't make more room in my store to be able to serve more people. And also, I can't guarantee that more people are going to come. She has a super seasonal business. So,
Mm.
working through the process, just looking at the numbers might make you go, yeah, this is great. These are the goals I want to tackle. Or, that feels off for us. And so we're going to adjust it. Or, now I understand that we have limitations in reaching that goal. What can we do to change it and actually give us a fighting chance of actually getting there?
hmm Yeah, and what it helped with us is like a few ideas that we had that we like, wanted to be doing but didn't. But it gives you that like, no, do that because
Yeah.
that's working and it's
Yeah.
going to make you more money than anything else you're putting your effort into, which has always been something we've tried to focus on a lot, and that we're putting our efforts in the right place. I've always maybe I've heard too many horror stories on this podcast of people who grow, but they really aren't growing
Yeah.
and not making money while they're doing it. So we've always pushed hard to be profitable from the very beginning, which is, we don't, unless there's some reason to not be profitable. I don't know. I don't think that's not what we're trying to do. Trying to make money here. So one of the things that we have been talking or needed to be doing more about was events. So we do chocolate tastings here in our shop. People really love them. They're popular, and it brings people from like like an hour or two away. We've had
Mm,
people driving from, which is just awesome. And then they have a good
yeah.
time in the town because it's like cute and there's other things to do. So we hired somebody to run events for us to do more of those, to bring more people in the store. So that's a great one. And then we were already working on like some expanding our product line a little. And then we had talked that you had done this with, and maybe it was the same client who was like kind of maxed out in the store and needed it
Mm,
to make some more money. And so started making more products. We're just repurposing kind of the same ingredients that we have and a lot of the same packaging ish. So like it's not a big project to find new ingredients, make new stuff.
yeah.
We get new packaging, buy in bulk. We're just kind of reusing what we have and just getting things out there. But what we found is that whenever we expand our product line, we sell more.
Mm,
So the fact that now we have the data to show that we sell more when we expand our product line in the store and online, and we make the most money doing that. So now we've got more products. We like kind of just stepped on that more.
yeah. Yeah, you're right that you have a good memory, because the something we were talking about was for that other client, I'll share, they were buying things to resell in the store, but some of them were things that they could make in-house, and the margin, after doing the math, the margin is higher on the made in-house product. And so that was a conscious decision to, make the product in-house. And so maybe the revenue dollars weren't going to go up, but the gross profit dollars were on that product, which is also a big win, right? Because that equals more cash in the business, in addition to adding brand new products to the product line. So yeah, they did a combination of both things,
Yeah.
which I think you sort of also kind of doing as well.
Yeah, we found that so we carry other products as well. One, just because we like them and we want them here so that like we can eat them and I don't have to
Yeah.
drive to go to the stores to sell this stuff. So like there's that reason. But also they're just good products, and like it's nice that we can support like other food businesses and sell their product here and give them a
Yeah.
place to sell, and it increases the check average with that. So like with chocolate, there's just so many different products that people have had throughout their life. Like, and there's no way you can ever possibly make everything to satisfy everybody's memory of the thing that their grandma used to have for Christmas. So there's just things that we just don't or can't make. So we brought them in for other people. But what we've been hearing from our customers is that they're like, wait, but you don't make this stuff, but you make this stuff. Well, I'm going to buy yours
Mm,
because we want to support you. And it's like, well, that supports us too. If you're buying the thing that's here, like we already bought that, like
yeah.
we make some money on it. So instead of fighting that, we're just listening to what our customers are saying.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's kind of
Yeah,
nice too. That
it
they're like,
is
"Hey, we're in
nice. It
your
is
store. We
nice.
want your things." It's kind of like going to, you talked about craft breweries, earlier. It's like You go to a brewery, you're like, I want what you're making here. I don't want
Yeah.
maybe something you brought in to make sure you have something for every palate. We want to try your stuff, and buy your
Hmm.
stuff. So with the revenue forecasting, and something you mentioned is it's meant to be targets, right? And so we went through the process of sort of forecasting based on percentages of total revenue, looked at that and said, okay, does this make sense for us, the areas we want to focus on, the margins we want to achieve for our business. And then the next step, which is still playing out for you, is, as you mentioned, monitoring. How are we doing in relation to the goals that we've set? So looking at your revenue on Shopify in store with wholesalers at the end of every week is so valuable, because and not just looking at it, but looking at it in comparison to where are we supposed to be. One of the things we do with a lot of our clients is we send them weekly updates and we say, like, okay, you're at 25% of your spending budget for the month, and it's week 1 of 4. So you're right on target, right? If you were at 50% of your spending budget, after the first week, okay, maybe we need to take a look at this and say what is going on here. Similarly with revenue, if you're on track at 25% of your revenue goals per channel at the end of week 1, okay, we're on track. But if you're at like 10%, you have the opportunity to say, what's happening here? Just the kind of focusing online is like, are people coming to the website? If they are coming to the website, is our conversion rate down? Like, what is happening in our process, in our systems, that people are not buying at the rate that we predicted they were? And one of the things I absolutely want to talk to you about today is a tool that you started using, and I'm looking at my notes here. It's called Report Pundit.
Hmm.
And it's there are other types, I think, of reporting services like this. This is the one that you use. I think it's valuable to share with people. They're not a sponsor of the show or anything like that, but you started utilizing them. Can you tell people the kinds of reports you started out with, and then we can kind of dig into the value that they're providing you guys?
Yeah, so kind of this came from a suggestion from Sarah to monitor our cost of goods very closely, like on a weekly basis, and also just how we're tracking towards the goal. So
Mm,
I was like, oh, Shopify's got all this data. I'll just, open up this analytics tab here and I should be able to create some reports. No, I did not do that. So I was like, well, let's just check out an app and see if there's something. I'm sure that we're not the only one that sells like this using Shopify.
yeah.
And I just downloaded Report or got Report Pundit for, I don't know, I didn't even do that much work into it. So check out if there's something else that you need to. But it's been great so far. It's like under $30 a month. And so now we get weekly reports. I have them. We work a last day of our week's kind of Sunday. And so Monday morning, I have it send us new updated reports to our emails. And we are looking at our revenue, sales for the week, how it tracks against our goal. I think it's in the terms of like for that week. And then how we tracking toward on the year.
Hmm.
And then product sales by item
Nice.
and channel, which is great. So we can see like at a high level, these are the channels, these are your channel sales, and then the costs associated in that channel, and then products through that channel, and then quantity of products. I think that's everything you see right now, which is a lot, but like it's really good to see because like previously when we look at data or like sales numbers, it's like looking historically back, like
Yeah.
more of a longer time period. And you're like, okay, these are our top selling items for like the last year. But I think that kind of numbers are different than like on a weekly basis. And so we've noticed some things where, it's just the two of us. We don't really have anyone, just that one person who does events. So really everything touches our hands going out of here. Even then, sometimes you feel like something is selling a lot or something is not selling. So being able to see the product sales by week and then being like, oh, wow, I didn't realize we sold so many of those things and that we didn't sell those many of those. It felt different, right? So then like now, particularly with like merchandising in the store, or recommending to retailers like what kind of products to carry and how much they should get. It's helped us like be able to act quicker on that and kind of just push more of what's selling. So it's been surprisingly much better than I thought because nobody likes to go in and have that task of like go in and look at the numbers.
Yeah.
But they were great in that like they just help you set it up. Like there's all this like, AI, we're going to build reports with AI and stuff, but they just have a person and you just tell them what you want and they build a report and you're done. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
I
great.
thought that was great when you're like, they have people. They have people that you just and they email you and they're like very timely, which I was like,
Yeah.
that's amazing. But I want to touch on the idea of like, thinking what's moving, when you're working the register
Yeah.
and and then your wife's working the register, one product might be moving with you and not with her. And so your vision of, how product is selling is different than hers, right? And
Hmm.
you get a sense of, I know what this costs. I know how expensive that is. I know what's moving and I know what people like. But when you look at the data, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm not here 24/7. I'm like, yes, maybe there's only two of you, but there's still two of you. So you're only getting, a part of the picture. And so having that hard data is so valuable. The other thing is, you're absolutely right. Going to run the report, it's some massive roadblock, even if it only takes you a couple of minutes because you got to log into
Yeah.
Shopify. Maybe your password isn't saved for whatever reason. You got to go, you got to get the password. It's just annoying. And to
Yeah.
have custom reports delivered to your inbox, yes, you still have to open the email and look at it, but I think that that's a much smaller,
Yeah.
burden to entry than
Yeah.
running the
We're
report.
all we're all in our email all day long. Don't we
Yeah.
know? It's okay. We don't need to
Yeah.
pretend like we're not. We're opening in there. What was I just thinking? Oh yeah, I wanted to just mention that like we have a lot of products too, which also makes it. I
Mm,
think we have like 20 to 30 at any time.
yeah.
And then we also change out the chocolate bars like seasonally. Um, so we're moving through a lot of different products, and so
Yeah.
it's not that super easy. I was listening to the episode last week with the guy that made the tortillas
Mm,
in Arizona, and I
yeah.
was like, man, that's really nice. Like he just buys like four ingredients. That's smart.
Well, he does weekly flavor drops though.
Okay,
So he has his
I
like
missed that.
standard and then he does, but still like week to week he's, the what he's buying is minimal, but like in our freezer right now we have like a habanero peach and then a what is the other one? It was like a three cheese, three pepper thing, but like, you got it and then it moves on, the next week, but he always does have his like, you know,
Yeah.
his staples as well. But yeah, it's less than 20 SKUs. So no matter how many like weekly flavor drops he does, it's definitely less than what you're working with. The other thing I want to just kind of call out too is that sort of, you're still looking back at the numbers in a sense, right? What did we sell last week? What have we sold so far this month? So that you can look ahead though and say, where are we in terms of our goals? And do we need to focus any time and attention in a certain area to make sure that or give it the best effort to hit our revenue goals? I also love that you mentioned using the data to inform your wholesalers and talking to those folks about what to buy. It's reminiscent of when I talk about owning your region and getting sales data so that when you want to grow or you want to open a new retailer or even just starting small with a handful of stores so you really understand, what do people like, what are they purchasing, what is the frequency that they're purchasing with, how do you drive sales in a store, right? You can learn all of that, having the data, figuring that out, and then using it to grow, using it to inform how you work with other people. So much value in that. And I can think of like 100 different scenarios where that same idea can play out in a really positive way. And it's just by looking at the information.
And it comes down simply like in the longer term goals so that like we don't have to work as much.
Yeah.
We make more money and work less.
Yeah.
Um, is just simply it. Like, I'm not going to spend all my time on this thing that's like a 50% margin when this thing over here with a 70% margin is selling really, really well.
Yeah.
And then now you can, and I mean, ultimately, like, you know, now if we were to then like grow or expand into something like I've been kicking the tires on like a home manufacturer for certain products
Right.
or do we go through like a larger retailer channel or something like that? I think it'll wait until we get to something like, no, no, this is really good and it's done. And we know that because we've been operating and executing it. And
Yeah.
then, when you have it right and know when you can, then you can turn it up to dial up.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. I do want to touch on, if it's okay with you, some of the tips that you gave one of the fellow founders in
Yeah.
office hours. And their big question was, should I hire someone to do marketing for the company? They were wanting to grow Shopify sales from what I
Yeah.
remember. And it was like, should we invest in hiring a person? And I sort of said, well, definitely hold off for a second and let's look at some information and see what we can learn. And I thought you gave such great advice around this. Um, can if you remember, or can you talk
Mhm.
about, because this relates to the prior work that you used to do before joining your wife full time,
Yeah.
what types of things, and the reason I want to talk about this is because I think that when we want a certain outcome, we often think, especially as very busy founders, I need to hire someone now to help me do this. But the frame of mind that I was in is, can we make sure this thing is working as best it can before we go hire someone to generate revenue? Kind of like the profit assessment, right? Before I give you the green flag, Matt, to like go and sell the heck out of the chocolate, let's make sure that everything's working properly within the business. So
Yeah.
can you share some of the things that are like top of list to look at in this instance, like before you invest a good amount of money in trying to grow online sales with
Yeah.
someone?
Um, Yeah, and it's a tough one because like that's one of the things that came out of the office hours was that our online channel is makes we make more money on that
Hmm.
than like wholesale. So online and retail are roughly the same. So I'm thinking through that right now as well.
Right.
And I think kind of like what she had was like, I'm selling online a little right now. I'd like to sell more, partially in that they were wanting to move away from their distributors. And one of the ways to do that is to sell online. And so I should preface this by saying, after my restaurant stint, I got a job doing sales for a software company that sold analytics software. And I did that for like 6 or 7 years through a couple of different companies. But um, we were always selling to people that ran e-com sites largely and large websites and think like Fortune 500 kind of size stuff.
Hmm.
So I talked with a lot of people who are out there running just large e-com sites. So I'm kind of familiar a little. I don't know how to do the things. Like I
Yeah.
can't get in there and do it, but like I can have a conversation and understand all the things. And I saw a lot of like what works and what doesn't. And I think what was really interesting with her was that she was already selling on the website and her conversion rate was high,
Hmm.
which was great. And so we kind of took a look at, I think that it was just digging into what the numbers were already there. Shopify already captures a ton of data. So just looking at like, well, how many people are adding to cart? Is there like a big missed area up there? How many people are coming to the website? Where are they coming from? And she went and installed, I think it was over YouTube and a beer until like 2 a.m.
Yep.
Google Analytics and Google Search Console and the meta tag. And what that does, right, especially for right now, is going forward, like gives you is a lot of delayed data collection to then be able to make decisions on. I think the next step was actually she did the free shipping offer because like we knew some things like that email was working, sending emails led to sales, and that free shipping offers led to sales.
Yeah.
But then the questions were kind of like, but how are you getting those people kind of into the email list?
Yeah.
And are you making money on the free shipping and the case sizes? And so what came out was more like she could make more money without having to like spend a bunch of more money on hiring somebody and getting somebody to do, the online
Ex-
sales part
yeah.
when it was more of just like, let's change some case box sizes and let's keep working on the email list and we'll make more money than we're currently making without having to go spend all the money to
Yeah.
just right. There's that big question, and this was what you were driving home to. There's a big question of like, do I hire somebody to do this thing? But you need to know more about that thing to get somebody to come in and do that very specific thing
Yeah.
than
And there
like a
was,
very broad.
yeah, you and one other founder in the office hours that month, along with this person we're talking about, we're like, don't spend any money yet. Like, put the Google Analytics in. Something that stuck in my mind was you were saying, find out where people are coming from when they come to your website. And number one was via the newsletter. And then number two was a direct line. And then
Hmm.
Google was number three. But when Googling, I think we learned that it was Googling the name of the company or like the specific product. So
Yeah.
the awareness, like people were already aware of the brand and looking for it and coming. So instead of spending money on like a social media person or, some of the other things that she was considering, it's like, if you're going to hire someone, have it be someone who's going to develop that, like a way to get people on your newsletter. But you guys actually had some other advice about maybe running some low cost ads on Facebook to get folks onto the mailing list. And so, again, it wasn't like don't hire anyone, but rather hold off on hiring someone until you know exactly what you want to be hiring for. And I think that was
Yeah.
the most important piece for me, and what I wanted them to take away, from that bigger conversation. It was just so valuable to have the two of you cheering her on and like
Hmm.
helping her work through it and say, like, you're not alone. We've done this too. And like,
Yeah.
here's some resources, and we know you've got 1,000 things on your plate, but it'll be worth it to kind of slow down and do this bit of research before you hire someone. So thank you for the value that you brought. And I like sharing that with our listeners so they know like what office hours is beyond looking at their own numbers, is you really get a lot of support from the other founders as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're probably the people out there who are most like you in what they're doing, even if it's a little different here and there. But
Yeah.
um, there's a lot of wisdom, I think, if you're at the point where you're willing to pay for office hours.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I so appreciate you. Thank you so much for creating amazing chocolate, for sharing your time and some insights into your business, what you've learned and how you're approaching the numbers. I think for one thing we know for sure is that finance is intimidating, and we want to make it more approachable and easier. And I think that hearing from folks like you and other Bobby Yachts is helping to do that. So just a big thank you to
Yeah.
you for
Yeah,
being here.
absolutely. Well, thank you. I've listened to a lot of these conversations, and they have helped a lot for me too. So hopefully I can help somebody else out there that's trying to figure out this money thing, because you got to make money at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Looking for more content like this? Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll see weekly podcast episodes as well as other content related to the show. Just visit youtube.com/@thegoodfoodcfo.
Thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help good food founders find the show. We'll be back with a brand new episode next week.